The skies over Nevera Prime were a battlefield of fire and smoke, where once pristine spires of crystal cities now lay shattered across the horizon. The planet's azure oceans churned under relentless bombardment, their tranquil beauty replaced by plumes of steam and ash. Arlen Thray, captain of the Evershield, stood at the bridge's wide viewport, his fists clenched tightly behind his back. His tall, lean frame bore the weight of his people's survival, his luminous, violet eyes reflecting the carnage below. The once proud Kaler race was now cornered, their centuries-old dominance shattered by the brutal onslaught of the Tyrell Dominion. Behind him, the hum of the ship's systems was punctuated by the frantic voices of his crew. Officers in iridescent uniforms darted between consoles, their composure strained but unbroken. The Evershield was their last bastion, a massive carrier housing the remnants of Kaler society, refugees, soldiers, and the final threads of their culture. "Captain," Commander Velis said from her station, her voice steady but clipped. "Another wave of Dominion ships detected in the outer sector. They'll reach orbit in less than an hour." Arlen didn't turn. He stared out at the horizon, his expression carved from stone. "What's the status of our defenses?" "Minimal, sir," Velis replied, glancing at her monitor. "We've rerouted all remaining power to the planetary shields, but they won't hold for long. Our fleets are scattered, and reinforcements, there are none." Arlen's silence spoke volumes. The Kaler had reached out to their allies across the galaxy, sending desperate pleas for aid. Empires they had once stood beside in battle now ignored their calls. Trade partners turned a blind eye. Friends became strangers when the Tyrell Dominion's shadow fell over them. All except for one species. "Captain," Velis said again, hesitating this time. "We received a response." Arlen turned sharply, his brows furrowing. "From whom?" Velis hesitated, as though unsure how to phrase her answer. "Humans." The word hung in the air, and the crew around her visibly paused. Humans, an enigma in the galactic tapestry. The Kaler regarded them as a wildcard, a species younger than most but as stubborn as their homeworld's iron storms. Known for their peculiar ways and unpredictable actions, humans were more often discussed as nuisances than allies. Arlen's jaw tightened. "Details." Velis pulled up a holodisplay, the image of a human ship flickering into view. It was an unremarkable craft by Kaler standards, angular and utilitarian, a stark contrast to the elegant designs of the Evershield. "The vessel Resolute is en route. They've sent a simple message: we're coming. Hold fast." Arlen blinked. "That's all?" "Yes, sir." The captain let out a long breath. It was typical of humans to offer a response so brief and devoid of detail. They often acted first and explained later, a trait that unnerved many in the galaxy. But they were coming, which was more than anyone else had offered. "Humans," a voice muttered from a nearby console. It was Vera, the young communications officer. Her luminous blue skin darkened with skepticism. "Their technology is decades behind ours. What can they possibly do against the Tyrell Dominion?" "Survive," Arlen said, his voice sharp. "Humans excel at survival." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Arlen turned back to the viewport, his gaze hardening. He knew their odds hadn't improved. One human ship against a fleet of Tyrell destroyers was laughable. But hope had been in short supply, and even the faintest spark was enough to hold on to. The silence was broken by a sharp alarm. Velis turned to her monitor. "Dominion ships entering orbital range." Arlen straightened, his voice firm. "Bring shields to full power. Redirect all auxiliary systems to the defense grid. Prepare for incoming fire." "Yes, Captain." As the crew scrambled to follow his orders, Arlen's mind raced. The humans were coming, but they were still hours away. The Kaler had to hold the line until then. Failure meant not only the destruction of their homeworld but the extinction of their species. He couldn't let that happen, not on his watch. "Velis," he said, his tone softer now. "Prepare an evacuation plan. If the shields fall." "They won't," Velis interrupted, her voice steely. "We won't let them." Arlen gave her a faint smile. It was a fragile thing, but it carried weight. He turned his attention back to the chaos unfolding below. His people were scattered, their cries for help echoing across every channel. The Dominion ships loomed closer, their dark forms blotting out the stars. And then, like a single note in a storm, a news signal appeared on the scanner. Velus's eyes widened. "Captain, it's them. The human ship has arrived." Arlen's breath caught as the Resolute emerged from hyperspace, its engines blazing. It was smaller than he'd expected, its exterior marred with scars from battles fought long before this one. But it moved with purpose, cutting through the void like an arrow. A transmission crackled to life. The voice on the other end was rough, distinctly human. "This is Captain Dana Reeves of the Resolute. We hear you've got a problem. Mind if we join the party?" Arlen stepped forward, his voice steady. "This is Captain Arlen Thray of the Ever Shield. Your assistance is unexpected but appreciated." Dana chuckled. "We'll take that as a compliment. What's the plan?" Arlen hesitated. He didn't have one. The odds were impossible, and every tactical solution he devised ended in disaster. But the humans weren't waiting for orders. They had already engaged, their ship darting toward the Dominion fleet. "They're insane," Velus muttered, watching the display. "No," Arlen said, his voice quiet. "They're human." As the Resolute launched into battle, Arlen felt the faintest flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in weeks. It was fragile and fleeting, but it was there. Hope. The Resolute moved like a predator in the void, its engines roaring as it weaved through the Dominion fleet. On the bridge of the Evershield, the crew watched in stunned silence. The human ship was outmatched in every measurable way: size, firepower, technology. But its movements were swift and deliberate, as if it thrived on impossible odds. "Captain Thray," Velus said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've engaged the Dominion flagship." Arlen's jaw tightened as he observed the display. The Resolute had positioned itself directly between the Kaler and the Dominion forces, drawing fire away from the planetary's shields. Energy blasts lit up the dark expanse, the human ship dodging and returning fire with precise strikes. It wasn't an equal fight, but it wasn't a surrender either. A transmission came through, and Dana Reeves's voice crackled to life. Evershield, you've got about 5 minutes before your shields collapse. We're giving you an opening. Use it." Arlen leaned toward the console. "An opening for what?" "To evacuate your people," Dana replied. "We'll keep them busy. You get your civilians out." Velus turned to Arlen, her expression incredulous. "They can't possibly hold the line alone. It's suicide." Arlen's chest tightened. He knew she was right. The Dominion's forces were overwhelming, and the Resolute was just one ship. But the humans had made their choice, and the Kaler couldn't afford to waste the opportunity. "Begin evacuation protocols," he said firmly. "Get the transports ready." Velus hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, Captain." The bridge erupted into a flurry of activity as the crew relayed orders. Across the Evershield and the remaining Kaler outposts, civilians scrambled to board evacuation shuttles. Families clung to one another, their faces etched with fear as they were ushered into cramped vessels. Soldiers worked tirelessly to maintain order, their resolve unshaken despite the chaos. Arlen turned back to the display, his gaze fixed on the Resolute. The human ship had taken several direct hits, its hull scarred and smoking, but it continued to fight. Its weapons targeted the Dominion ships with ruthless precision, exploiting weaknesses in their formation. Arlen couldn't deny the effectiveness of their strategy. It was bold, reckless, and entirely human. "They're buying us time," Velus said quietly, her tone laced with disbelief. "But at what cost?" Arlen didn't answer. He didn't have to. The Dominion flagship loomed closer, its massive cannons charging for another volley. The Resolute moved to intercept, its smaller size allowing it to slip between the larger ships. Arlen could see their strategy now. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to disrupt, to force the Dominion into a chaotic engagement that would delay their advance. On the Resolute's bridge, Captain Dana Reeves gripped the controls, her face illuminated by the glow of the display. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency, their focus unshaken despite the odds. "Victor," she barked, addressing her tactical officer. "Status on their flagship?" The man with the cybernetic arm glanced at his monitor. "Shields at 80%. We're barely scratching them." Dana cursed under her breath. "Then hit them where it hurts. Target their engines." Victor smirked. "That's gonna get their attention." "That's the idea," Dana replied. "Fire everything we've got." The Resolute unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy blasts, the weapons streaking toward the Dominion flagship. Explosions rippled across its surface, and for the first time, the massive ship seemed to falter. Its formation wavered as smaller Dominion vessels scrambled to defend it. On the Evershield, Arlen watched the display with a mix of awe and apprehension. The humans were holding their ground, but their ship couldn't take much more. He knew the moment of truth was fast approaching. "Evacuation shuttles are launching," Velis reported. "We're sending the first wave to the outer system." Arlen nodded, his expression grim. "Good. Prepare the next wave." The Dominion ships regrouped, their firepower converging on the Resolute. The human ship shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering dangerously. Dana clenched her teeth, her hands gripping the controls as alarms blared around her. "We can't hold this position much longer," Victor said, his voice tense. "Shields at 20%. Dana's eyes narrowed. "We're not done yet. Divert all remaining power to weapons. If we're going down, we're taking their engines with us." Victor hesitated but nodded, his fingers flying over the console. The Resolute surged forward, its weapons systems glowing with renewed intensity. It fired a concentrated volley at the Dominion flagship, the blast slamming into its engines with devastating force. A series of explosions erupted along the flagship's rear, sending shockwaves through the surrounding ships. "They're pulling back!" Velis exclaimed on the Evershield. "The Dominion flagship is retreating!" Cheers erupted across the bridge, but Arlen remained focused. He knew the Dominion wouldn't retreat for long. They were regrouping, and when they returned, they'd come with even greater force. "Captain Reeves," Arlen said, opening a channel to the Resolute. "Your actions have given us a chance to evacuate. I won't forget this." Dana's voice came through, weary but defiant. "Don't thank us yet. We're not out of the woods." The channel crackled as another volley of Dominion fire struck the Resolute. The human ship was battered, its hull barely holding together. Arlen's chest tightened as he realized the truth: the humans wouldn't survive another wave. "Dana," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Fall back. You've done enough." "No," she replied firmly. "Not until your people are safe." Arlen closed his eyes briefly, grappling with a mix of admiration and frustration. The human stubbornness was maddening, but it was also what made them extraordinary. They were willing to sacrifice everything for a cause that wasn't even theirs. The evacuation shuttles continued to launch, their engines blazing as they carried the last remnants of the Kaler to safety. The Resolute remained at the forefront, a lone shield against the Dominion's fury. On the Evershield, Velis turned to Arlen, her expression resolute. "They're giving us everything they have. We can't let it be for nothing." Arlen nodded, his voice steady. "Prepare the final wave. Once the civilians are clear, we join them." The Resolute was barely holding together. The Dominion fleet encircled it like a predator closing in for the kill, their weapons trained on the battered human ship. Fires raged across its hull, exposing glowing fissures of molten metal. Inside, Captain Dana Reeves stood at the helm, blood trickling from a gash on her temple. The ship's alarms screamed around her, but she didn't flinch. Her hands remained steady on the controls, her expression hardened with resolve. "Status report," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. Victor, his cybernetic arms sparking slightly from damage, looked up from his console. "Shields are gone. Hull integrity is at 30%. Weapon systems are offline, and we've got fires in decks 3 and 5. Oh, and we're out of coffee," Dana managed a dry laugh, despite the gravity of the situation. Thanks for the uplifting update. Options? Victor's smirk faded as he returned his attention to the readouts. We're out of tricks, Captain. They're closing in. The bridge fell silent, save for the hum of the failing engines. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their determination beginning to falter. Dana felt the weight of their lives pressing down on her, the knowledge that every decision she made now would decide their fates. A crackling transmission interrupted her thoughts. Captain Reeves, this is Captain Thray of the Ever-Shield. We've launched the final wave of evacuation shuttles. They're en route to the outer system. Dana exhaled in relief. Good. Then it's time for us to retreat. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Retreat? Arlen's voice carried a note of disbelief. You've done enough. If you fall back now, no one would fault you. Dana smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. I didn't come here to do enough. I came here to make sure your people survive. And until every one of those shuttles is clear, we're staying. On the Ever-Shield, Arlen clenched his fists, his heart sinking. He wanted to argue, to tell her that no victory was worth the cost of her life and her crew. But he saw it in her eyes on the display. Dana Reeves had already made her choice. Then we're staying too, Arlen said, his voice resolute. The Ever-Shield still has firepower. We'll cover you. Dana's eyes widened. Your ship is carrying thousands of refugees. If you engage, then we'll hold the line together. Arlen interrupted. No more arguments. Dana stared at the screen for a moment before nodding. Understood. The Dominion ships surged forward, their weapons lighting up the void. The Ever-Shield and Resolute formed a desperate defensive line, their combined firepower focusing on the largest of the attacking vessels. The battle was chaotic and unforgiving. On the Resolute, Dana shouted orders, her voice unyielding. Redirect power to the engines. If we can't shoot them, we'll outrun them. Victor worked furiously at his console. We can give you speed, but maneuverability's shot. They'll still hit us. Then make it harder for them to hit us, Dana retorted. We didn't come here to roll over. The Resolute veered sharply, narrowly avoiding a barrage of plasma fire. The maneuver threw several crew members off balance, but Dana didn't pause. She guided the ship into a cluster of debris from a destroyed Dominion frigate, using the wreckage as cover. The Ever-Shield joined the fray, its elegant design belying the devastating power of its weapons. Energy beams streaked through the darkness, cutting through the Dominion ranks. On the bridge, Arlen directed his crew with precision, his voice calm despite the mounting pressure. Target their command ship, he ordered. If we take out their leader, we might disrupt their coordination. The Ever-Shield fired a concentrated volley at the Dominion flagship, its cannons glowing as they unleashed their payload. The Dominion ship's shields flickered, struggling to withstand the assault. For a brief moment, hope flickered among the Kaler crew. But the Dominion was far from finished. Their ships regrouped, unleashing a coordinated barrage that struck both the Ever-Shield and Resolute simultaneously. The human ship shuddered violently, sparks flying as systems failed one by one. Engines offline, Victor reported grimly. We're a sitting duck. Dana gritted her teeth, gripping the controls tightly. Not yet, we're not. Reroute auxiliary power to the thrusters. Give me anything you've got. Victor hesitated, then nodded. Aye, Captain. On the Ever-Shield, Velis turned to Arlen, her expression grim. They can't hold much longer. Arlen's jaw tightened. Then we give them everything we've got. Prepare for a final strike. As the Dominion ships closed in, the Ever-Shield and Resolute fought side by side, their crews united by an unspoken bond. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time, but they refused to back down. The Dominion flagship loomed large, its cannons charging for a decisive blow. On the Resolute, Dana Reeves stood tall, her eyes blazing with defiance. She activated the comms, her voice cutting through the din. To everyone listening, she said, this is Captain Dana Reeves of the Resolute. Today, we stand together. Not as Kaler, not as humans, but as allies. As family. And if this is our last stand, then we make it count. Her words resonated across the ships, bolstering the spirits of both crews. Arlen felt a surge of pride and determination as he watched the human ship hold its ground. Fire everything we have, Arlen ordered. Let's show them what family means. The Evershield unleashed a massive volley, its weapons tearing through the Dominion ranks. The Resolute followed suit, its remaining cannons targeting the flagship's engines. The two ships fought with unmatched ferocity, their combined firepower pushing the Dominion back. But the cost was high. The Resolute took another direct hit, its hull buckling under the pressure. Dana's crew worked tirelessly to stabilize the ship, their resolve unbroken even as systems failed around them. In the midst of the chaos, Dana's voice rang out once more. We're not done yet. Not while we still have breath. The battle raged on, each moment pushing the two ships closer to the brink. And yet, against all odds, they held the line. The Resolute groaned under the weight of the Dominion assault, its fractured hull lit by flickering fires. On the bridge, Captain Dana Reeves steadied herself against the console as another blast rocked the ship. Around her, the crew worked tirelessly to keep the vessel from collapsing, their faces grim but resolute. They were running on sheer determination now, every system pushed to the breaking point. Victor status? Dana demanded. Victor wiped sweat from his brow, his cybernetic arms sparking as he worked. Weapons are toast. Shields are gone. Engines barely have enough juice to keep us drifting. We've got maybe 5 minutes before we're scrap. Dana's jaw tightened. Then we make those 5 minutes count. On the Evershield, Captain Arlen Thray stood at his command station, his violet eyes locked on the display. The Kaler flagship was battered but operational, its remaining weapons systems focused on the Dominion fleet. The Resolute's desperate stand had bought the evacuation shuttle's precious time, but the fight wasn't over. Velis, Arlen said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Can we target the Dominion flagship's main cannon? Velis's fingers flew over her console. Not directly. Their shields are too strong. But their power core is exposed. If we can get close enough. Arlen nodded. We'll ram them if we have to. Prepare all remaining weapons for a final strike. Velis hesitated, her normally composed demeanor faltering. Captain, if we do this, we finish the job, Arlen said firmly. They've given us no choice. A transmission crackled to life, and Dana's voice filled the Evershield's bridge. Captain Thray, you need to get your ship out of here. The evac shuttles are clear, you've done your part. And leave you to die? Arlen replied, his tone sharp. That's not happening. Dana's chuckle was weary but genuine. Typical Kaler. Always so noble. But this isn't your fight. It is now, Arlen said. You stood with us when no one else would. That makes it my fight too. Dana didn't respond immediately. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Then let's end this together. The Evershield surged forward, its engines flaring as it closed the distance to the Dominion flagship. The Resolute followed, limping alongside its Kaler ally. The Dominion ships tightened their formation, their firepower converging on the two vessels in a last-ditch effort to crush the resistance. Captain, Velis said, her voice urgent. They're targeting us. Hold steady, Arlen commanded. Focus on the flagship. If we take it down, the rest will scatter. On the Resolute, Dana gripped the controls, her heart pounding as the Dominion flagship loomed larger in the viewport. She knew their chances were slim, but she wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not when they'd come this far. Victor, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Can we overload the reactor? Victor's head snapped up. The reactor? Captain, that'll blow us to bits. Dana's gaze was unwavering. It'll also take them with us. If it comes to that, we need to be ready. Victor hesitated, then nodded. Understood. The two ships pushed forward, their combined firepower hammering the Dominion flagship's shields. The massive vessel shuddered under the assault, its once impenetrable defenses faltering. On the Dominion bridge, Their commander barked orders, his confidence giving way to desperation. "Shields at critical levels," one of his officers reported. "Divert all power to the cannons," the commander snarled. "Destroy them now!" The Dominion flagship's main cannon began to charge, its energy core glowing ominously. Dana and Arlen exchanged a glance through the comms, a silent understanding passing between them. "This is it," Dana said. "All or nothing." The Evershield fired its final volley, the energy beam striking the Dominion flagship's exposed power core. The shields collapsed, and the ship shuddered violently as internal explosions rippled through its structure. "Direct hit!" Velis exclaimed. "Their core is destabilizing." The Dominion flagship's cannon fired, the massive energy blast streaking toward the two Allied ships. Dana's hands flew over the controls, pushing the Resolute into the line of fire. The blast struck the human ship head-on, tearing through its weakened hull. The Resolute erupted in flames, its structure breaking apart under the strain. On the Evershield, Arlen watched in horror as the human vessel was consumed by the explosion. "Captain Reeves!" he shouted, his voice cracking. But the Resolute's sacrifice had not been in vain. The Dominion flagship's power core detonated, the resulting explosion engulfing the surrounding enemy ships in a blinding wave of energy. When the light faded, the Dominion fleet was gone, reduced to smoldering debris. The bridge of the Evershield was silent, the crew staring at the display in stunned disbelief. Velis turned to Arlen, her voice trembling. "They did it! They stopped the Dominion!" Arlen nodded, his throat tight. "At what cost?" A faint signal crackled to life on the comms. Evershield *, this is the Resolute, or what's left of it. Arlen's heart leapt. "Dana?" The transmission was filled with static, but Dana's voice came through, weary but alive. "We're in bad shape, but we've got survivors. Could use a little help over here." A wave of relief washed over the Evershield's bridge. Arlen turned to Velis. "Get a rescue team to their location. Now." As the Evershield moved to recover the survivors, Arlen felt a profound sense of gratitude. The humans had come when no one else would, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Kaler in their darkest hour. They had fought not for glory or gain, but because it was the right thing to do. Later, as Dana Reeves was brought aboard the Evershield, battered but alive, Arlen met her with a rare smile. "You're reckless, Captain Reeves. But you're also extraordinary." Dana chuckled weakly. "You're not so bad yourself, Captain Thray." The two captains stood together, surrounded by the remnants of their crews. The battle had cost them dearly, but they had achieved the impossible. Against all odds, they had won. And in that victory, a bond had been forged, one that would endure far beyond the stars.